Today, it's my end of the year top 25 favorite photos that I made for 2017. So I'm a couple weeks past 2017, and that usually gives me a little bit of perspective on some of the photos that I took right at the end of the year too. And so I've compiled a little slideshow here of 20 of my favorite photos of the year. And I guess that doesn't mean they're necessarily my best photos, because that's completely subjective. I don't even know that I think these are my best photos, but they're my favorite photos. So a lot of the experience of me making those photos, I'll have that experience, and you as somebody seeing the photo doesn't have that. So you might completely disagree and think that it's a crappy photo, but I might love it because of the experience that I had making that photo, if that makes any sense. So with that little kind of disclaimer that these aren't necessarily my best, because best is up to every person differently. Let's take a look at the photos. I'll run through these in chronological order and tell you a little about each image and the settings I used, and hopefully you enjoy the images and maybe you'll learn something too. Let's do it. On to the images. So image number one here is a great gray owl. This is my favorite great gray owl. It's a leucistic owl, which means it's got a lack of melanin, not a complete lack, but a lower than normal melanin in its feathers, which makes it a lot lighter in tone than every other great gray owl I've seen. So this owl, this picture was taken in March, late March, and last year was a terrible year for great gray owls. We had so much snow that a lot of them died, and a lot of them left the valley searching for food. And so I was hoping that this owl had survived the winter, and this was the first day that I saw this owl after that really difficult winter. And I found the owl and was super excited to see it and know that it survived the winter. And then I had it hunt right in front of me down into the snow and catch some prey here. And I made a beautiful photo of it. So pretty special photo. I think it's a nice photo by itself for sure, but this one is special to me because this is an owl that I particularly adore. It's kind of a special, rare owl, and for me to know that it survived this really brutal winter where a lot of owls didn't survive, and see that it was doing well and still hunting in the snow. So this one was taken with my Nikon D500 on a 200 to 400 millimeter lens, 1/500th of a second, f4, ISO 800, and it's a great photo. I love this one. All right, next we will go to landscape photo. This one's black and white. This one I did a long exposure on, so I put on a 10-stop neutral density filter here. This is as the ice is receding, starting to melt out. This was in mid-April. So Jackson Lake is starting to melt. So just the edge of the water there is melted out and keeps that reflection dead still right there, because the rest of the lake is still icy, so the wind isn't generating any waves. We had really cool clouds that day, and I did this one at 120 seconds, f11, ISO 200, and this is on my Fuji X-T2. So this one was all about the clouds and the movement of the clouds, and I got a really nice dynamic image out of it. Converted it to black and white, and I love it. All right, next we're moving on. This one's kind of abstract. I'm kind of starting to dig abstract stuff more. And this is a aspen grove in early spring. So this is the end of April, and this was a big snowstorm happening. And I was out looking for grizzly bears this day and in the snow, and as this snow is happening, I looked up and saw this beautiful aspen grove, and the snow was just dumping, and there's this one kind of lone silver log amongst the the living aspen trees, and this one silver log kind of laying diagonally in there that kind of became for me the trigger to make the photo. And it turned out beautiful, and I love it. Abstract, it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but it made my top 20 for the year. I love it. Here we go. This is Grizzly Bear in the snow. This was not taken on that same day that the previous one was, but in a similar area. So this is after that snowstorm. So there was fresh snow on the ground. I've got the Grizzly Bear coming almost straight at me in the snow with a nice blurred out background, and paw coming up out of the snow flying. I love this one. So the settings on this one is Nikon D500 with my 600mm f4 lens, 1/1000th of a second at f8, ISO 200. So that 1/1000th of a second froze the action of that bear walking through the snow. Love this one. All right, moving on. I have another bear. This is a grizzly bear. This is a subadult grizzly that has recently separated from its mother. And this is the end of April. Down lower in the valley where there's no snow anymore. This was taken on a Nikon D4S on my 200 to 400mm lens again. 1/2000th of a second, f5, ISO 1600. I had to manual focus this one because there's the willows in front of the bear's face, and so the bear was cruising through the willows, and I saw it in the willows and was set up hoping something like this would happen, and as it walked along it stood up to get a better view of what was going on in its surroundings, and I got there just in enough time to manually focus and get a nice sharp photo here. I love the color of this one. I love kind of the chaos of the willows, and of course the bear looking directly into the camera. That's what makes the click right there. All right, next. This is April 30th, a little bit later in April. As the ice is breaking up on Jackson Lake again, I was out walking the shoreline looking for landscape photos, and there was this spider on the snow, and it seemed a little weird to me. It was something I'd never seen before, and I decided to make a photo of it. So this was taken with my Fuji X-T2 on my 10 to 24mm lens. This is 1/100th of a second at f16, ISO 200. And I just dig it because it's not my typical, like, I love any kind of wildlife with that scene behind it, with the Tetons, Jackson Lake behind it. Anything sitting there I think would be beautiful. Normally, you know, the kind of wildlife I shoot is elk, bears, moose, deer, owls, birds, whatever. So this was a totally different one for me. A little spider there, tiny little thing with this huge mountains in the backdrop. I like the way that one worked out. Moving on, then, this will come from my spring trip up into Yellowstone National Park. So this is a grizzly bear walking along with a reflection in Yellowstone Lake. So this is late May. I love this photo. This is very like Yellowstone to me. This says Yellowstone. You've got some little geyser activity steaming out there in the background. Grizzly bear, just iconic, obviously. And then a beautiful scene silhouetted there. The reflection, everything about it works. It's great. This was taken with a Nikon D810 on a 70 to 200mm lens, 1/640th of a second at f5, ISO 200. Lovely photo that just screams, I'm in Yellowstone National Park. So this is my favorite image from that trip, obviously. Moving to another grizzly bear. This time it's a Grizzly Cub. And this is a cub of the famous Grizzly 399, who came out of the den this past spring with two new cubs. And don't get many opportunities like this this close. So this was shot from the safety of my vehicle. The bears happened to just kind of stroll up onto the scene and pause for a few minutes and while they grazed on some of this new fresh spring grass. This is early June. So before too many vehicles showed up and the scene became a little unmanageable, I had just a few moments alone with these bears and was able to get this nice photo of this bear eating a blade of grass and kind of showing off its little budding grizzly claws there. So anyway, I love this photo. This is on a Nikon D500 with my 600mm lens, 1/250th of a second f4 ISO 800. And in hindsight, I should have gone ISO 1600 and gone for a 500th of a second. I would have had more keepers out of that scene. At a 2/50th of a second, that grizzly cub moving around, a bunch of the photos in this series had a little too much motion blur in them. But this one worked out great. All right, moving on. More grizzly bears. This is a bear called Blondie and one of her cubs. The light here made the photo for me. They were out in some fresh wildflowers in late evening light just before the sun's going to go behind the Tetons. I was able to arrange myself to get behind them and get the backlit scene, and I love backlighting. So this was just a kind of a lucky situation where I had moved into position to get the cub backlit. Blondie wandered in right behind her, and the cub stood up all at the exact same time. So that was one of those situations where you just got to get lucky for things like this to happen. This is taken on my Nikon D500 with a 600mm lens, 1/800th of a second f7.1 ISO 200. And this one is fairly heavily cropped here too because they were a long ways away. But the image worked out great. Very, very graphic with the outline of the grizzly fur glowing in the evening light there. All right, this is Blondie, that same bear, a different day obviously, where she's out in the wildflowers, and it's just spectacular. I love this photo. I printed this one on aluminum, and it's hanging here in my house, and it looks fantastic. The cubs are off to the right out of the frame. Unfortunately, it would have been spectacular to get all three of them in the frame with this. It didn't work out that way, but I'm in love with this image. I think it's great. This is also the Nikon D500 and a 600mm lens. 1/320th of a second f5 ISO 320. And this one is cropped in to be a panoramic because the top and the bottom of the frame was nothing interesting. So I cropped those out, focused on the flowers and the bear, and I love this image. Moving along, great gray owl. So I love this image a lot. This one is taken in July, and this owl is looking a little ragged. I think it's molting at this phase, and I think that contributes to the image, is kind of the raggedy look of the owl. Usually they're very smooth and beautiful and kind of manicured looking, and this one isn't. It's looking a little ragged. But I just went for a little different kind of composition and framing with this. I had an owl perched on a beautiful stump, and I took the normal photos of it on its stump. But then as it looked up to the sky, there was an eagle flying by way overhead, and as it looked up to the sky, I thought, I'm going to do the same thing and kind of create that sense of space that the owl's looking up into. And the background stayed really nice and dark conifer, exactly what I like. And I made the photo right then as it's looking up to the sky, and it gives me kind of a sense, almost like a sense of wonder as this owl is looking up to the sky. I converted it to black and white on this one. I can't even tell you why, but I like it better in black and white. So I love this photo. I love all these photos, of course. This is a Nikon D500 taken on a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, 1/400th of a second, f2.8 ISO 800. Worked out great. Here we go, the Eclipse. I have to include an Eclipse photo in this, right? So instead of just doing the big, the big Eclipse photo taken with the big lens, everybody got that shot. This is my only truly unique shot I think I got of that day because nobody else was in this location. There were a lot of really great Eclipse photos taken. I love this photo. It kind of will remind me of my first total solar eclipse and the experience of being out there and just the awe and amazement and just the kind of head explosion moment that happened when that split second when it went from 99% totality to totality was a thing that I'll never forget. And I have this photo to remind me of that moment forever. It was just incredible. So this is absolutely in my top 20 for the year. This is a Nikon D810, 14 millimeters, 1/5 of a second, f11, ISO 64. Great Gray Owl. This one is about to pounce on the attack. So this one has a little more kind of dynamic, a lot more dynamic feel than the last Great Gray Owl photo. So this is as it's just leaping off of its perch to dive down into the grass below and catch a vole. The light was just perfect. The background was wonderful. It was far enough away that it just totally fell apart into just a blur of color and beautifulness. And got a nice little action sequence there as it came up, and great pose, great gesture. Everything worked with this. Just simple and clean and wonderful. So this one is taken in Nikon D500 again on my Sigma 120 to 300 f2.8. This is at 1/2000th of a second, f2.8, ISO 800. Lovely photo. Okay, I think we've made the leap to fall on this one. This was October 2nd, so we had a couple of big early season snowstorms this year, and I got out. I love those early season snowstorms, and I got out and made some photos. This is at String Lake in Grand Teton National Park with some fog still laying low and the snow-covered trees, beautiful calm reflection, and then this lone rock out there in the lake. And I just adore this photo. It's just peaceful and calm and serenity. That's what it says to me. Because that's what it was when I was out there. I was out there all alone. It was just dead quiet after this storm, and the fog was hanging low. And God, it was just such a beautiful morning. So I hope this photo conveys that to you, but it conveys it to me. Of course, I was there, but this is what I wanted that photo to feel like when I took it, and it worked out great. Beautiful. So this is my Nikon D850, 70 to 300 millimeter lens, 1/30th of a second, f4.5, ISO 800. I didn't have a tripod, so I was shooting handheld. If I had a tripod, I would have shot that different settings. I would have gone to base ISO and probably f8 or something, but I was hand holding. I maintained a 1/30th of a second there to make sure everything was super sharp, and it worked out great. Okay, now we're on Grizzly Bear in the fall. So this one is another October photo. This Grizzly Bear was in the kind of light that just makes my heart skip a beat here. I love this backlight on grizzly fur. Is just so fantastic. This bear was in a perfect location. As the sunrise light came up and backlit it, I just kind of had to wait for a couple of different opportunities of making an interesting shot, or making a shot that's more interesting than just the bear in the meadow. And this one, with kind of the way the light streaked across the ground and the way the light hit this little clump of trees that are kind of forest fire burned and dying. but it only hit them a little bit, just enough so that you see them and it balances the photo, but not enough that it takes anything away from the power of the bear in the photo. So I love this one, the light, and just had to wait for the gesture of the bear. So had most of the time its head buried digging and rooting around, and then it would lift up once in a while, sniff around, and back in. So wonderful photo. The light was just perfect. Perfect subject. Everything came together on this one. This is Nikon D500 on my Sigma 100 to 400 millimeter lens. 1/500th of a second, f5.6, ISO 400. Moving along. That's my favorite mountain there. That's Mount Moran. This is near the Oxbow Bend, the famous location where everybody gets the reflected shots of this mountain in the Oxbow Bend in the Snake River. This one was all about the light as well, as usual. So I had some spectacular clouds, and as I was looking for photo opportunities, 10 minutes earlier this would have been a blah photo because the sun hadn't yet come up behind the mountain. So the Mount Moran and the clouds were lit up, but these trees and the grass in front of me wasn't. So I had to wait for that light to come up, and then it's getting filtered through the trees. So I kind of get this layered effect of the light laying across the ground and lighting up those trees and the grass. So I had to wait, otherwise that would have all been very dark, which was a cool photo too, but I wanted that extra kind of layer in there. So this big black cloud up at the top was spectacular, and this looked great in color too, but I think with the black and white treatment it just gave it a little extra drama with making it more about the texture than the color, because it was a pretty dramatic color photo as well. So this was taken with my Nikon D850 on a 24 to 70 millimeter lens, 1/80th of a second, f5.6, ISO 64. All right, this is a sure sign of fall, right? This is a bull elk at sunrise in the foggy breath. So this one came together. I found the elk well before sunrise and just had to wait and hope that when the sun came up it would be in position where I could still photograph it backlit. And this one all worked out great as well. And I spent a lot of time looking for elk this fall and came away with very few images that I liked, and this is my favorite of the bunch, without a doubt. So this was taken with my 600 millimeter lens on the Nikon D500, f5.6, ISO 200, and 1/6400th of a second. Really had to underexpose that to get kind of the rim light around the elk and its antlers and keep the background nice and dark, as the sun was just barely above those trees that are the background there. So I love this one. It's about the light again. There's no detail in the elk. This one's about the fog and the outline of its antlers and its fur. And it's just wonderful. Here we go. Great gray owl. I ended the year really strong with great gray owls. I had a great late November and December with great gray owls, after having a mostly terrible entire year before that, because they really got their butts kicked last winter, and so they didn't nest because they were just trying to recover from a really difficult winter. So without nesting great gray owls, and with a bunch of them being killed or having left the valley, a bunch of them starved to death, there just weren't many owls around, and there kind of aren't. But I did find some owls here right at the end of the year, and made some really nice photos of them. So my last three are great gray owls that were taken in November, end of November, early December. So this one is just smacks me in the face. Like, this to me is a super powerful image. Could be one of my all-time favorite great gray owl photos. I need to live with it a little bit longer because it was taken pretty recently, but I love this one. It's just the pose is just power and magnificence and energetic, and the stare directly into the camera is just kind of mesmerizing to me. So I really love this photo. It was taken in pretty dark conditions here with super dark conifers in the background and just enough light on the bird to make it just really pop. And so everything about this, I love it. I wouldn't change a thing. It's just fantastic. This was taken with a Nikon D850 at 1/1000th of a second f4 ISO 1600 on a Nikon 300mm f4 lens, handheld. Just lovely, wonderful image. Let's see. This was taken the same night, so I think that's a first. I have two of my favorite images of the year taken on the same day. This is the same owl, and this was as it was flying through the forest after the sun had set, and it was getting quite dark, and I probably should have already gone home for the night, but I got this photo of it in flight. This one's all about the light. Backlit, but very indirectly backlit. There was some kind of clouds and stuff in the background that you can see there at the top of the frame that were kind of glowing orange after the sun had set. That's filtering through the trees and through the forest, and just enough light hit it to light up its wings and tail feathers from the back and give it a real nice kind of almost soft backlight. It's just gorgeous. So I love this one. This one's all about the light. Again, that's the theme here. All about the light, apparently. Except the next photo. The next photo isn't all about the light. But anyway, I love this photo. So this was taken Nikon D850, the same 300mm f4 lens, 1/800th of a second f4 ISO 6400. Turned out great. Love that flight shot. And here's the last one, number 20. This one isn't necessarily about the light. Being nice, soft light in the shade helps this photo. So direct light could have been bad or good for this, but being this nice, soft, beautiful light helps this photo. It's a pretty standard like great gray owl headshot, which they're not necessarily easy to get, but I've got some of those because the great gray owls will fly in and land next to you more often than you'd think they would. So I have great gray owl headshots similar to this. This one is all about the blood on its beak. So it had just ripped the head off of one of the gophers that it caught and swallowed it, and it left that little bloody mark down its beak. And luckily I was in close enough to get a picture of the owl headshot with that bloody beak. So I'm not sure how obvious that is to you or was to you when you first looked at the photo or not. But that's what I see when I look at that photo. I go, oh, it's a great gray owl headshot. Bam! And then I see the blood and I go, oh yeah, now we're talking. So that's what I love about this photo. This was Nikon D850 with the 600mm lens, 1/200th of a second, f5 ISO 200. So that's going to wrap it up here. I love that photo. I love all of them. Top 20 was fun to go through and kind of relive my year of photography. It's a lot of work to go back through all the images, but it's super fun to kind of relive that and do that at the end of the year. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's different than my normal vlogs, but I think this is an important thing for me to do, and I'm glad I kind of have this reason to kind of kick me in the butt to put this together and rethink about these images and why I took them and what I love about them. It's a good exercise for me, and I hope it is a good exercise for you too. But anyway, that's my top 20 for the year. I had a freaking great time making these images. It was kind of a difficult, it was a very difficult year for me non-photographically, which kind of translated to me feeling a lot of frustration in photos. I had a tough kind of professional and personal, some situations and circumstances that were really difficult and trying. And I think I made a lot of effort to not let that kill my creativity and enjoyment in the rest of my life too. And so I hope these photos kind of indicate that. I feel like looking back upon it, I made some really nice images that I'm very proud of. Anyway, thanks for watching. Always appreciate your support and your kind words and your comments and stuff. Leave me a comment. I would actually love it if you would leave me a comment and let me know maybe which one or two of these are your favorites. I'd be super curious to hear kind of other people's perspectives who weren't out there actually making the photos, and what you guys think the best one or two of these are, and that'll help me maybe give me some perspective on what works for other people too. So I would appreciate it if you do that. If you've hung in there this long through the video, hang in there for another 30 seconds and type me in a quick note and just let me know which ones you liked. All right. Have a great day, and thanks again for watching. See you next time back on the regular vlog where I'm out actually making photos. See ya.
You sold me out, I did not notice. It's been going on for a while. Ooh. When grace is gone, I can see all things so clear. It was all pretend. I can find a higher line over the clouds above. I can find a higher ground. I just have to reach past the summit line to reach higher love. Years have passed and I did not notice. Still I'm thinking about our past. Ooh. Now when you are gone, I can see all things so clear. It was all pretend. You look back and I look back, we don't see the same thing. It's time that we just let it die. Oh, I can find a higher